All right. And then I will try and do the share into the Facebook and just see what it says. I think it'll do it because it did it last time. And I'm on the same computer in the same room, wearing the same shirt. No, not wearing the same shirt. All right. Why can't I spell osteopath?
It's a tough one.
Okay. So I'm just changing the name of the talk so it's your name. Sharing it on my timeline. It's going to go public. It's preparing. So it could be live any moment now. Directing. Yay. And it's working. Okay. Awesome sauce. So I'm going to also put this live into the group so that the people in the group will see it
Okay.
live if they're on right now. But in the meantime, you can go ahead and just tell us. So I'm always just curious about people and why people do what they do. And what is it about like were you a science kid? Were you good at school? Did you have a curiosity about animals, or what was your interest and how did you get into becoming an osteopath?
Yeah. So I think that my sort of initial response to if I was interested in science would have probably been no. I wanted to be outside playing sports and doing those sorts of things. But when I really look at it, um, all of my education post high school was in science. So I
Hmm.
have a kinesiology degree, and then I came into osteopathy. And funnily enough, I actually went to university to become a dentist.
Oh,
So my goal was dentistry, and I took a a kinesiology class, and I changed my major that very day when you still could, because you could still walk down to the office and change your major within a matter of minutes. And so I changed my major, and it was kinesiology all the way. And the goal ultimately for me was physiotherapy. And as I was going through school and approaching application time for physio school, something wasn't clicking for me anymore. I
yeah.
didn't know what it was, but it wasn't clicking. And so I spent time after university being a clinical kinesiologist. And then I got more into the fitness industry for a while. And then some old injuries sort of surfaced. And I found osteopathy. Really, osteopathy found me. Um, it was the only thing that helped. And then I started to really dive into it. What is this science? What is this approach to the human body? How does this work? And I was very fortunate that timing in my life all worked out, and I was able to go to school and become an osteo, and sort of here we are today now. So that was sort of my path through to finding osteopathy, but truly it was more the other way around, and I think that that's quite common for a lot of my colleagues when we speak about it. Is osteo sort of finds the practitioner because it's a lot of us are injured from sports or other things, and we're all trying to find a way to help, and it's the way that's been effective for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like that for me with perimenopause and menopause, where people say, well, how did you get into it? And it's like, well, I got really sick. I had like a lot of the very painful, I had endometriosis, which is not from perimenopause, but it did get worse during perimenopause for me. And the headaches and all the different troubles that I've had health wise. So um, I wanted to talk about it, what I was going through. And I was talking about it because, you may have noticed that I like to talk. And so my girlfriends, they're good listeners, but they would say, well, here's their litany of symptoms. And then they would say it's not perimenopause. And they really didn't get that doctor approval, like that stamp
Mm-hmm.
of this is what it is. You will have perimenopause. So I started just thinking there's got to be other people like me that just want to talk about what's going on and look into possible ideas or solutions or things that they might try. So I started the CPMS group from that idea of just talking about it and being open about what was going on. And I started handpicking people that might possibly be in it and might possibly want to talk about it. And then they invited their friends that might be in it and might want to talk about it. And before I knew it, we had 100 people, and we had a really healthy group where there was no bickering, there was no shaming, there was no whatever, like keyboard warrior thing. And but I kept having people that nobody knew asking to join. And so we had a little like powwow in their nice little containers. Should we open it up and, maybe help a lot more people, but have some negative experiences, or should we just keep it nice and small? And one of my who actually became my first volunteer ended up, I think it was who said, if you're if you're okay with putting up with the jerks, we should open the doors. And then today I think we're at like 12,700 and something, right? It goes
Mm-hmm.
up and down because people join and then they don't want to be sold to. And that's one of the things that I'm struggling with a little bit, because I designed all of these things, like this conference is designed with the questions that we get, right? I invited you
Yeah.
because I have women who will say to me, I really don't want to do all that stuff, right? I don't want to do the pharmaceuticals, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time and money doing supplements that may or may not help me and spend years suffering and struggling and experimenting. Like, what can I do? And, chiropractic is somewhat helpful if you're having actual body pain. Physiotherapy can be great if you're having specific issues like the pelvic floor stuff. Definitely, physiotherapy is great for that. Or chronic muscle tension, physiotherapy can be really good. But what I found with the osteopathy is that it just hits everything somehow, but in a very gentle way where I don't feel like some of the physiotherapy can be very painful and difficult to get through those treatments. And I never feel that way with osteopathy. So can you explain that to me? Like, why is that that it's somehow a gentler treatment and more effective?
Yeah, absolutely. It's we're we're very fortunate in that we are sort of a jack of all trades and sort of Swiss Army knife of the manual therapy, and that we can do everything. We can we work with low back pain or injuries. We work with injury rehabilitation, prevention. We work with all of those things. But we are much different, which I think is what's quite surprising to a lot of people, in that they are used to uh, the other approaches, right? And it can be a little bit more painful. And so the science side of it, and I'll try. I can nerd out all day long, so I'll try not to go too far into it. But there's a science side of it. So when we look at how the body really works at the neurological level, at the spinal cord level, everything's working the same way. And so our body has to have this sensory input. It has to feel something, and then the brain and the spinal cord have to figure out if it cares enough about that sensory input. And if it deems it's important enough, something has to happen. So there's a motor side. So there is a hormone is released. I move my arm, that's motor. My stomach contracts. All of these things happen, and that's happening everywhere at all times in every system of our body. And so all of the other modalities, they work on the motor side of that loop. We work on the sensory side, and that's why we all work. But this allows a much more gentle way in, to address the issues. And you know, there's discomfort sometimes, but it's usually a lot more gentle, where the sort of the no pain approach versus the other one. So that's more the way that we can kind of work with the nervous system, just a little bit different than our other friends in other modalities.
Yeah, and I don't feel like it's like a replacement for like I'll still go see my chiropractor, right? And I think that's important. But what I've noticed just about my hips is that the chiropractor's main focus might be let's make sure that they're aligned, right? So that the height of the hip is about the same on both sides. So I don't have some one higher or lower. And then they try and correct that. And so the height of my hips has been pretty good. But there is this internal rotation that doesn't really get addressed by the chiropractor. And this is like a habitual muscle tension, just kind of pulling this in a protective fashion, I think, because I had that cyst on that ovary. These kind of things are so common, I think, for women in perimenopause,
Mm.
but other practitioners just don't really think about it on that terms. But when you and I were talking about that rotation of the hip, it makes sense that, okay, so now my ovary isn't quite sitting where it would be. It's not in alignment with the other ovary, and it's maybe not communicating well up the, the column into the pituitary gland, our master controller maybe isn't able to actually get the hormone um, system working properly. So that's one of the things that I did notice right away after starting to see you is that it felt like everybody was talking to each other again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we're all, you know, I think all of us, like you said, chiropractors, physios, massage, we all play a role, and we all have the same goal, which is to helping people's bodies get into a better position. The biggest difference for us is that, you know, we're looking at making sure everything is level from every structure, square, all that. And when we find, you know, something like an internal rotation, or the hips aren't quite level, we start asking why. We start asking why, and our knowledge and understanding is how the body works three-dimensionally through all systems. And so, what is going on in any layer of the body, in any system, in any way that is either causing that to happen or is being impacted by that now happening in the body. So, you know, our goal is to really find out, is it the chicken or is it the egg, and the why behind the real root cause of what's going on, and you know, why do things keep coming back? Why do I feel better after X for, you know, a couple of days, and then it comes back, and trying to get the body to a better place where it doesn't come back either as often, it doesn't come back at all, or it doesn't come back as painful or severe, or, you know, depending on what it is that we're working with, that is the sort of symptom of what's going on. And that's really where we start to sort of look at everything a little bit different, in that our first question is always why. We, you know, we can find the thing going on, but figure out why. And ultimately, our job is to find health, and to find and facilitate health within the person overall.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's actually partially what led me to try osteopath was when I was doing my yoga therapy program and at Mount Royal, one of the other students kept saying, "You got to try osteopathy. It's really changed my life," And so I kept kind of thinking, well, yeah, eventually I'll get around to that. And then it was one of my musician friends because, people don't really think about that, but musicians are athletes. We have repetitive injuries all the time. And a lot of the time for us, like one of the best drummers in Canada, Gary DeBoke, he was my dad's friend, and he ended up with tendonitis in his upper back and shoulders that really never healed and created so much pain that he was unable to play. And when he first started looking into what to do for this, he was told just to change instruments, as if that's an easy proposition, right? And for most musicians, it's not. It's like 10,000 hours to get really amazing at whatever it is you're doing. And then switching becomes just not an option. It's not going to happen. And if it does, because
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to play at that same level. So that's kind of how I ended up working with the first guy. And then he was really helpful in a lot of ways. But whenever I tried to talk to him about hormones or what was happening with the perimenopause, it's not that he wasn't sympathetic or understanding to what I was saying. He was a good listener and he understood what I was talking about. But he never really, it didn't feel like that was really getting addressed. I don't know if he had other things on the agenda, right? From looking at my body, maybe he had his own agenda of what he was going to work with, but it didn't feel like it got like the hormone system was really being addressed at all. That's why I really appreciated meeting with you and getting to talk a little bit before we started working together. And it's been incredibly helpful for me where I had pretty much chronic back pain. I was in pain all winter last year. Very frustrating for me. And as a yoga therapist, none of the things that I knew or were doing were helpful enough to keep me from ending up in pain by the end of every day, and I don't have that now. So what can you tell us about hormones and how did you do that?
Yeah. So
In 5
my
minutes.
so my yeah. So my role when working with any person is ultimately to facilitate an environment within the body where it can find optimal health. And so, in doing that, there's a degree of understanding that we are more than just bones and joints, more than just muscles and tendons, and that we're made up of a lot of fluid, right? So, blood flow is a big factor. And so, when we're looking at it, and I have patients come to me perimenopause, postmenopause, even cycle
Yeah.
dysregulation, uh, anything that is going on that has brought them to me, that information is very, very relevant because that's what's impacting your daily life. And tells us it tells us a little bit of some of the systems that could potentially be involved in what's going on. But from there, how we really go about it is making sure that, as simple as it sounds, we make sure that all of the structures are level and square, and sort of like a plumb line, as center of gravity being where it should be and how the spine should work. Uh, Now, as far as how that comes into play with the hormones, and how this becomes relevant for perimenopause, menopause, is that hormones travel through our bloodstream. They have to travel through our bloodstream to get to their target receptors, to get to their target organs, and then to do their job. And the efficiency in which it can get there plays a role in how well the body is functioning. And so, hey, more time under gravity, more birthdays, more twists and turns, more life lived, the piping, so to say, is not as efficient as it should be, right? So those blood vessels, the nerves that are controlling those blood vessels, all of these structures, can be impacted from a, I can say it's a simple twist of the pelvis, but a twist of the pelvis can start this sort of cascade for many multitude of reasons, and every individual is going to be different. every
Hmm.
every every pelvis with a right preference has different things going on for that person than people with everybody's just a little bit different. But it really does come down to making sure that all of our pumps, big fluid pumps, are able to move that blood around, are able to keep the paths clear, and that the nerves supplying the organs, the nerves supplying those blood vessels, and all of the surrounding tissues are all able to do their job. Really, it comes down to getting the body in the best position to do what it's intended to do. And that, our lifestyles now are different for a multitude of reasons, and gravity is always pulling on us, and so we have those factors always at play, and those little twists and turns as we start to get things moving better, everything starts feeling better, and those symptoms of brain fog and general fatigue and uh, sleep disturbances, all those things, they start to decrease, or go away entirely in some cases, or they're just not happening as often, or I only wake up once a night now, and it's only because I had a cup of tea last night, right? So it's those sorts of things, and so we're starting to move forward, and that's really where it comes down to as far as the hormone system, in that it's traveling through the blood and it regulates, pretty much hormones regulate
Like
everything other than
everything.
what our nerves do.
Yeah.
Everything. So
Like when I first started learning about hormones, I was like, I don't feel that I'm a very sciencey person. I was not inclined towards math and science at all. I'm a dyslexic, so it was kind of like, let's torture this little girl by making her learn this stuff. But I am very curious and I'm really interested in why people do the things they do and how other people live. And I got a minor in anthropology largely because I just love hearing about other cultures and how other people are doing whatever it is they're doing. And when I really started learning about it, I was like, okay, it is complex and but it's simple in one way if you think of it like homeostasis, is that the body has this baseline and it wants to get back there, whatever it is. And that's why, if my body seems to like to be about 165, 170 pounds. So no matter what I do, I end up back around there. And for years, I was fighting it and trying to get down to 155 because that's the artificial goalpost of the doctor's BMI. And eventually, the more I learned about it, I was like, well, if my body's comfortable there and I'm eating a variety of foods and I'm not starving myself or overeating and I land there regularly, like, what's wrong with that? My body's happy there. And I think that part of what happens when you're kind of, I look at it like removing like a blockade of some kind. Your system should, the freeway should be flowing and there's a little bit of a block. So instead of just flowing nicely, it gets a little bit stuck in this area and the body gets used to that and develops compensations around that. But my understanding is that part of what we're doing in general, working with the body and helping to remove those blockades, is that now the system is flowing in such a much nicer way. And then we get those uh those issues kind of out of the way so the body can come back to a better place and find that better place and be in that homeostasis. Like I saw you yesterday and I slept from about 11 o'clock until 6 o'clock. So I had a nice 7 hours in a row, which is like, it's brilliant for someone in perimenopause to be able to sleep for 7 hours in a row and not wake up. And I have my tips and my tricks and the things that I do if I do wake up so I'm not horribly sleep deprived, but I feel like part of what's happening, and there's been some psychological things like my boundaries have gotten better with other people. I feel like I've been a little bit better at communicating about what I'm capable of and not capable of, and not taking on as much stuff since these super highways are functioning a little bit better. And I can't really tell so much in my body, like in the same way as you can when you have a look at me and say that things are moving in the right direction and that the body is holding the adjustment. So, can you give us a general idea about like what that means about getting an adjustment and what you can expect after an adjustment and how that works, how the
yeah,
body might hold an adjustment and how that might manifest if you were, say, in perimenopause and coming to see you for help with those the main concerns we have: brain fog, sleep problems, and anxiety. Those are the ones that trouble us more than anything.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you hit on one of the major things that we do, right? And so when we're working through assessment, two of the big things that we look for are asymmetries within the body and restrictions of motion. So to an extent, we should have symmetry bilaterally, and every tissue from skin, you know, down to ligaments, fascia, everything has motion capacity and expected way that it should move. And so when that's restricted, then we start asking why. And it's it also comes down to how the tissues all feel. So every tissue has a specific palpatory sensation to it when it is not restricted and when it is restricted. And if it is acute versus chronic, something that's been hanging out there for a long time, and it all feels different and it moves differently. And so we're generally looking at through adjustment getting the big players moving first, right? Things like our pelvis, things like our lumbar spine, our thoracic spine, up or into the shoulders, how the shoulders are working to make sure that when we're walking that, our hips and our shoulders are moving through the gait cycle. So we're looking at those big sort of foundations, big trying to, make a strong foundation. And the twist would sort of make a foundation of sand, right, where things are not quite ever going to stay level. And so this is the case where the example would be, I have upper back neck pain. It keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. It keeps coming back. And then for whatever reason, that person maybe has something going on through their pelvis, either through their hip bones or the pelvis as a whole. And this is now a symptom. And so what we're looking for is bringing all of those structures back into alignment. And then oftentimes other structures follow suit, because ultimately the body the body is optimistic. And as osteos, we have to be internally optimistic. The body wants health. It craves it. And it can't control that these twists and turns happen sometimes because, I like to golf, or I like to sit with my foot underneath me, or I sleep only on one side, right? So the body only does what it can do, and it does a really great job at that. And sometimes we just need a little bit of help. And once that ball is rolling, once the pelvis is moving with more symmetry, once it has more motion, once the diaphragms are all moving with more motion, then the ball sort of starts to keep itself rolling now. And then you don't need to see me as often, or you don't need to see me at all for why you came in, which is the ultimate goal. Is that the body is now taking care of itself, healing and self-regulating mechanisms. And the best way that I can describe that, which I think for me, when I was going through school and as a kin to osteo, there was a shift in perspective and understanding, true understanding of how the body works. When we cut ourselves, it it should heal.
Hmm.
It should heal, and all of those properties that do that are found within the bloodstream. Blood is everywhere within us, and if it can do that on my skin level, we should be self-healing, self-regulating to some extent everywhere at all times. And so that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for that restoration of motion, and is that chronic tissue starting to change? Because over time we feel it start to change,
Hmm.
gets a different feel to it. Is that pelvis as rotated as when I saw you last? Or is it starting to now come out of that position more? Are all the other structures now responding in a manner that makes sense to their structure, right? because the structure of, well, everything down to everything in our body, the vertebrae, everything, it will indicate how it functions, right? So we can look at all of that. Is the lumbar spine moving as its structure of the vertebrae are indicating it should? Is the thoracic spine moving that way? Are these muscles in, our quads, are they moving as we expect based on where they're attached? And those sorts of things. And so as we go through a series of treatments, assessments, and treatments, adjustments, we start to see those changes. Typically, they correspond with the person feeling better. Oftentimes, sometimes some of the symptoms are a little stubborn, and that's okay because
Yeah.
the body eventually will turn that leaf over, and then
Hmm.
it will be off to the races.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that. But I mean, just listening to you talk from my first appointment was like, okay, this low back pain is just gotta go, right? Got to get this. But we talked yesterday in my session with you, and I I did talk about back pain, but like this much. It was like a mention. It's still there, but it's much better than it was, and it's not as disruptive. I'm really fascinated by I've got this chronic inflammation. It's fine until I get exposed to a virus, and then it attacks my heart. So I'm very sensitive to this whole idea of the heart as a muscle and working hard to pump the blood. And it just made me wonder, like I don't know if there's been studies done around osteopath and perimenopause, but one of the things that can happen for us is that our blood pressure can just go crazy where it's way too high and there's no like lifestyle change that happened. It's part of the hormone function. So I wonder if that might be possible, to really help with just the cardiovascular system in general, even though you're not doing something, you're not like pumping the blood back up from my leg or something like that, trying to encourage the heart to work better. But I do feel like that's part of what's happened is uh like come to think of it, actually, my blood pressure the last couple of times I've checked it has been normal and it was starting to creep up a little bit. So that's quite fascinating. And then, what makes you such a great guy about the whole talking about hormones and the women's health stuff? Because I've had I'm drawn generally to female practitioners. I feel more comfortable in general. But I've had a few guys work with me in different, like one of my favorite yoga teachers was a dude, actually two of them. And is a dude. But very understanding is that, and like you can't, like none of the things that I would say would throw him in that same way. Like if you said period to my old chiropractor, it was not that he wasn't professional about it, he was professional about it. And you could obviously, that's an issue if you're a woman in your 40s, probably there's something going on with your period, but you're just so open. And can you tell us a little bit about like how you got that way? Like, what did you do right to become the guy that's cool to talk
Yeah,
about this stuff?
yeah. Well, um, I think my role as a practitioner is to treat the whole person, and that means everything that's going on with them. And that oftentimes I'll hear this might be too TMI, too much information, and I go, nothing is too much information for me. It all tells me a story. And then, I was very fortunate. I was raised. My dad was actually a stay at home dad. My mom went to work, and that was, I think, really formative in that manner as well. But menopause, perimenopause, it impacts all of us. It does in one way or another. It really impacts all of us, and the most important people in my life are all women, and so they either have gone through menopause, are starting to go into menopause, or will go through menopause, or they have cycles or issues with that. And so these things there's been a large discrepancy in where studies have been shown, where the importance has been, and I'm very happy to and to see that things are shifting and that we're talking about these things because they're real and they matter and they impact people's lives and they impact the health of society and how we talk about it. And I think, because I've been talking about me coming on to do this for a while, and it got me thinking, and I was thinking back to when my mother went through menopause and the time of that, right? And that would have, for her going through that, it would have, her information would have been coming from her mother, right?
Hmm.
And so there's a generational thing that happens. And at the time, people didn't talk about it. You don't talk about it. It's just the hot flashes. It's
Hmm.
the change. Oh, like it'll pass. You don't talk about it. And I haven't had a chance to talk with my mother much about this yet, but I do wonder, like, you, you feel like you have to just go through this. Like, this is just something that has to happen, and then all of a sudden that's just it. And because you're a woman, and that's what was told, right? And I strongly disagree with that. Um, and that generational thing, that came from generations before, right?
Hmm.
And it came from, again, lack of there being studies being done. I think lack of there being potentially care about it because it was a change in hormones. So they, there was the notion of like, oh, it just is what it is, and it doesn't have to be. It is what it is. And so that's sort of where I'm at with it. I treat the whole person, no matter who they are, no matter what, and whatever they're going through. Well, there's a physiological process somewhere within the body that's driving that, and so it's all important.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think kind of what happened is like I was born in 1970 and I was like a latchkey kid. And my sister said that we were feral. Like we basically took care of ourselves from the time we were 9 or 10. And I mean, my parents were around, like, don't get me wrong, they didn't just leave us completely to our own devices, but we were expected to like take care of ourselves and be with it. And there, to a certain extent, even though my mom was really open, it was a put up and shut up kind of situation, right? As far as if you get a period, when you get a period, how bad it is. Not that we couldn't complain, but we were still expected to get up and do the, like gym class. You just do gym class because it's Tuesday. Tuesday's gym day. And I think as much as it's good in a way to realize that you are capable of still doing all of those things. I bet your conversation with your mom would be really interesting because of her as a professional and basically taking on that male role of as the breadwinner. If she got really, impacted by her symptoms, that could have been devastating for her to try to deal with because I talk to women all the time running my group who, either had to take a pay cut, a demotion, get a different job, work part time, take time off, go on a
Mm,
medical leave because they need time to actually figure this stuff out because it's so overwhelming. And a lot of it does seem like when I went to my family doctor and I was like, okay, I'm suddenly having like the anxiety I've always had. Was it around a 4 or a 5? And now all of the sudden it's at a 9 and I can't do it anymore. And she said, "Oh, that is part of perimenopause." And I was immediately like, "What? How could that be part of perimenopause?" And since then I've learned, about the stress hormones trying to pitch in. I'm just gonna pitch in here
yeah.
and make too much stress hormone. But that would have been very difficult to deal with that in that age of like, just don't talk about it. Whereas all of us now, us latchkey kids, we're just used to being feral and doing things on our own. So a lot of people are in the menopause space just talking about what's going on, whether people want to hear it or believe in it, or like I've heard and seen people saying like menopause isn't real. It's like, oh my God, you guys, like it definitely is real. It doesn't have to be. I'm always looking for ways to help women to step out of that place of just suffering with it, right? because it can change your identity in a way. Like you've always been a go-getter and now you have to change your work situation, or you have to suddenly, like one of my girlfriends has a couple different chronic illnesses and we joke like it's like a job having to go to these different appointments and take care of your body, because especially if you haven't really noticed, if you have never really paid attention to what you're eating and what you're drinking and your habits and your lifestyle and how that's impacting, it can be really overwhelming. So I'm super excited that you're coming and that you're, wanting to share about this and help women to find different options of what they can do to help themselves that isn't necessarily, a huge investment, right? Like coming to see you takes about 45 minutes or an hour. And I think when we started, it was like we did a couple back to back once a week, and then we just have expanded now to once a month. But I have noticed in that time, I'm much more comfortable in my body. And like I was saying, some other things have kind of spontaneously resolved or changed. And I don't think that that's an accident. Not that this is the only thing that I'm doing, but I think that it's kind of like at a certain point, like you, and you didn't really say this, but it's like there's a tipping point where something has to kind of push you over the edge into that uh, place of wellness where the body does want to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. Our higher centers, right? Our brain and like pituitary gland. We're talking hormones, all that sort of things. It requires information in, and it also has to send information out, and so it's as impacted by those twists and turns. Neck pain, those sorts of things. Information cannot go in and out as it's intended to do, and so as that all clears up, then yeah, we do start to see this progression of a tipping point, so to say. I mean, it's not always linear; it doesn't remain linear. The path of healing is not linear.
No.
We sort of ride those waves, ups and downs, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it doesn't feel as great. It doesn't necessarily mean that the body's gone backwards or anything like that. It doesn't mean it's taken steps backwards. It just means it's into its new evolution, and what it's processing now is different. But yeah, it's I'm very much looking forward to talking more on it, and on how osteo sort of addresses the whole body, the whole person, and how that does help. Because I've seen it help with lots and lots of my patients.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, a lot of what I'll be speaking on is from clinical experience, and the understanding of anatomy that I have, not necessarily from current osteo research done. Right, this is more from clinical experience and what I'm seeing in practice right now, and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm most interested in. And I don't know if I told you this, but when we were talking in one of my sessions and you said, keep in mind that even chronic conditions that people have had, like pericarditis for years and years and years, it can heal. And I walked out of that appointment thinking, you're the first person who said that to me. Like I don't even like a hopeful, because I kind of feel like as soon as you say it's what is it, idiopathic, meaning we don't really know why it's happening. It just gets kind of put in this box of we don't know why that's happening. So we'll just keep you alive when it flares up. We just won't let your heart stop. That's what we'll do. And for me, as someone who's like, uh, vibrant and curious, and I want to be alive while I'm alive, I totally don't mind dying when it's time. But I don't want to suffer for 20, 30, 40 years before that happens, please.
Mm-hmm.
So that level of hope, that really meant a lot to me to hear that. And I think that women in perimenopause also need to have that similar message of like, okay, right now things are happening, or even when they hit postmenopause, because I have that too, where people will contact me and like breeze through perimenopause, just no problem. Period stopped. And now all of a sudden they're having the sleep problems or the anxiety or, trouble driving at night or things that were never an issue before. And they're blindsided. And that's partially why I wanted to get everything together in one place for the school, so that when women start to go, maybe it's perimenopause, they can learn about it. And then that'll set them up to have
Hmm.
an idea, right? Of like, well, what kind of people, oh, there is such a thing as pelvic floor physiotherapy. I can't believe, like, I know how many women have no idea that's a thing. It's unbelievable. And I think that osteopathy is kind of a similar situation where it's there and it's helpful and it's useful, but a lot of people don't know about it. So I'm just kind of shining the spotlight on different things for people to check out that might work for them. And you're in Calgary and you're taking clients and patients and helping women and like
Yep.
I can tell you about my dry eyes and my constipation and and my lack of periods, my weiriods, right, where I get the symptoms but no flow. And I think that's important for people to know, right? I have women say that where they go into they see someone and then they say, but I didn't mention the because I'm embarrassed about this issue. And it's like, well, go back or send them a message or ask if you can do a phone consult because that's a really important thing that you completely missed out on getting help with because they're not going to know unless you tell them. So I think we should wrap up there because we're about 45 minutes in and we've covered so much great stuff and maybe even given you some more ideas about things you might want to hit on in your presentation. I'm really excited to see what you have to
Absolutely.
say. And I'm so grateful to you for being a decent guy and fighting the good fight and say hi to your mom. Tell her thanks for,
Yeah.
thanks for being a decent lady and helping you to become all you can be, right? And your wife too, and all the ladies that are supporting you in your life. And I will talk to you soon. And you just let me know if you have any questions. And also, I do kind of put it out there. If women have specific questions, they'll send them to me, and then I can send them to you, and then we can address them. If you wanted to make,
Absolutely.
yeah, because people do sometimes have questions come up. Sometimes they don't. It might be a thinker, right? Because we are talking about science and the body in a way. But when I first took anatomy at Mount Royal, I was like, why do we not learn about the human body when we're all walking around in one, and we don't even learn the basics of what it
Hmm.
is and what it's called? It seems like a
Hmm.
huge oversight. So if I can learn it as a dyslexic who does not like science, anybody can learn this stuff, and
Yeah.
help themselves to feel better and get back to being a fully capable person. So the other thing is I can't like end the meeting and then say goodbye to you because the only way I know to stop the live is to just end the whole thing. So I'm going to say goodbye to you
Okay.
now. And then if you have any questions or
Okay.
anything
Thank
comes
you.
up, you just let me know, Mac. Thanks for coming
All right.
today.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so
Bye.
much. Bye.